All right, we got Sam Cooley with us today, our other national tour staffer. We had Jacob on about a week ago. Sam, thanks so much for making time for us, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so I want to dive into a lot of stuff. I don't want to take up too much time. It's U.S. Open week, and you obviously have pretty good ball reaction, and are obviously bowling pretty good, plus 195 yesterday, I think. So, I know as a pro shop guy, I want to definitely find out what you think between the differences between Storm and Motiv in terms of the equipment and what you're liking and not liking. But before we dive into the juicy stuff, tell us about yesterday. What equipment were you throwing? What do you feel like were some of the key factors that helped you get to second on the day, right?
It kind of goes back to what happened last year on the same pattern. The only difference was we bowled on that pattern day 3, and we were the last squad to bowl. And by that point, they had already been reran twice. And if anything, they played truer to what was on paper. There was no little differences with topography, or if there was any kind of like built-in hold from a previous pattern, there was none of that. It had already been stripped and taken out. And my score last year was very bad. I think I averaged maybe 160 something.
Oh,
And
wow.
because of that, I missed the cut by like 100, 150. I don't know the exact number. I've pretty much shut that out of my mind altogether because it was that bad of a performance.
Sure.
So coming in this year, I knew that it was going to be just as difficult, if not more so. But then I saw my squad assignment that I was going to be bowling first on it. And that was probably the best way it could have panned out, because it's only the first time it's been run in the morning, opposed to later on at night when it's been stripped and rerolled twice. And whatever memory was there is not there, obviously, to start.
Right.
The choices I made were going in to try and stay even for 8 games. I had no expectation on score or trying to shoot a million or to grind. It was just to,
very, very different than the players, right?
night and day difference. It was just to try and not do any damage. And I think with no expectations there, I was able to see the ball motions and adjustments I needed to make quicker than what I would if I was having to try and chase it or panic and be overthinking what the right solution is, and then going through my mind what options I have. And by that point, I've wasted half a game and nothing's worked.
So it sounds like it allowed you to stay patient mainly, right?
In a nutshell, that's what this event is.
Yeah.
Compared to the players where it was a carry contest, this is a patience contest. And watching some of the squads afterwards, it's been interesting to see how some guys have the patience and some guys are in the mentality of, I need a 7-bagger a game.
Right. Yeah.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, and then when you throw it good and you get 9, it's hard to stay in the right mental state, I'm sure. So that leads into the next question, especially when you're bowling on flat stuff. You mentioned topography. Sometimes there's an advantage of having an extra set of eyes ahead of you on the pairs, ahead of you. What has your experience been like with the tour reps there in terms of your experience with Storm and SPI versus Motiv, and like the overall amount of resources that maybe Motiv has versus Storm? Because obviously, I don't think it's any secret that Storm has a massive market share. They sell more bowling balls. They've obviously Motiv's new to the space and they're growing. But I would think Storm has more resources, but they also have a lot more staffers. So, what's your experience like with that?
That is pretty much on the mark. They do have more resources, but they have to keep up those resources for all the players they have. My experiences with them were normally in a bowling center. We had Sean Ryan, Eric Kraus, Jim Callahan, sometimes Tim Mack, sometimes Steve Jacobs, depending on the locations. And so usually we'd have 2 to 3 reps at an event, and I'll usually camp out in a zone of a bowling center and just monitor that zone. So, for example, we're using 12 pairs for the US Open here. They would camp out if there's 3 reps, they would camp out on 4 pairs per rep to kind of spread out across the whole block and all the players that come into those zones. So if there was a handful of guys coming into Eric's zone, then he would relay whatever information he's seen from start to finish to those guys coming in each game. And then when they get to the next zone, Jimmy might take over from them because they're coming into his zone.
Right.
Now with Motiv, we don't have quite as many reps. Like we have Brett Spangler. Occasionally we have Nick Parr come out. So Brett does an amazing job running around 12 pairs, keeping up with the guys that we have, and
Right.
also getting the information on who's been there before us and where we're going to next, who we're following, where they played. So he's it seems like a one-man army.
One-man army, yeah.
Guys that we have,
Yeah.
which doesn't always go appreciated, I guess you could say at times, because
Sure.
it's a very long day. He's here from basically 7 a.m. until whenever the bowling center closes, and then you got to find time to eat in between those squads. We only have an hour and a half, if that, in between. So you have to try and find time for that, and then back again to do it the next squad, and then repeat every day for a week.
I could see
what he does.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Sorry, what he does by himself is it's amazing. I know if I was put in a similar situation like that, I don't know if I could handle it. And he's been doing it. He's been the rep since Motiv became big. That was maybe 10 years ago, and he's mostly done it by himself.
Yeah, that is pretty impressive. So shout out to Brett. That's kind of cool info to know. I could kind of see where, since he is the only guy that you're interacting with, that he almost kind of becomes, or at least maybe it might feel like he's even a little bit more invested in your success, almost like a coach, like, because he's it's not like you're bouncing around different people, you know what I mean? And so that's kind of interesting. And so now that obviously gets into the real money question, which what are the kind of advantages and disadvantages and differences that you're seeing between the Motiv and SPI product line?
Getting to the point about the differences that I see with the equipment, honestly, I really don't see that much.
Okay.
When you're at this sort of level, there's very, very minute differences that most people just wouldn't see. I find the Motiv stuff is definitely a little bit slower overall than what I'm used to, which is perfectly fine by me, because the last couple of years it seems I was using mostly slower response equipment, like, for example, Proton Physics, Novas, Gems, those sort of balls.
Right.
A majority of our patterns. So having a majority of the options being pretty similar, even going down the line, was definitely a benefit. Also, another big thing was Motiv being just the one brand. You don't have that many, I guess, overlapping options.
Oh, okay.
Like you would with some of the other brands. When you have multiple brands under one company, it can be a little bit tough trying to narrow out what's usable out here, what's usable elsewhere.
Right,
it becomes very difficult at times. It's
Yeah.
a lot of experimenting, and sometimes you just don't have that opportunity to go through it.
I want to hop in here real quick and let you guys know that if you like videos like this, make sure you subscribe. We're growing quickly. We really appreciate all the support. If you have any other ideas or feedback for our content, let us know down in the comments. But as always, thanks for watching, and let's get back to the conversation with Sam.
Through it.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, that makes sense. It's funny you mentioned that. It's kind of like the paradox of choice, It can make making decisions a little easier, a little less stressful if you don't have as many choices, which is kind of an interesting way, because sometimes you hear, I remember before SPI made it where their staffers could throw everything, and before they brought on Global, I remember locally there was a couple guys that moved from SPI to Brunswick, and they're like, oh, there's so many more options I can throw. But to me, it makes, as a pro shop guy, and knowing that, sometimes it's almost like two different colors of the same ball. Sometimes it feels like when you get a lot of options, I don't know if you feel that way, but I could see how it can be kind of easy. Like, okay, I know that's going. You don't have two balls that are like 95% the same that you're trying to figure out. You know what I mean? Is that kind of what you're alluding to?
That is kind of what I'm getting at. Like you mentioned, with the Brunswick brands at the time, I think they had 3 or 4 under their labels, and when you have a number of releases coming out at the same time, along with what's already been on the market, there's really not much difference. It could be a color difference, a core difference, a cover difference. the numbers could vary slightly, but
Right.
most people just won't see that difference comparing one ball to another unless
Sure.
it really stands out. So making that switch over to Motiv has definitely, it's like you said, it's a bit of a paradox of choice. It feels like my options are more limited, but I'm more aware of what those options are and how I
Yeah.
can alter things if I need to with surface layouts or anything like that. I
Right.
can make what I've got work.
Yeah, and I know some players tend to be ball switch heavy. Like for me, being an analytical guy, as a competitor, that was one of my weaker areas. Is I would be like, man, maybe if I switch this and I did this, I could maybe create a little bit more room. Do you find that you like to find a ball that matches up, and you tend to make the adjustments yourself, or do you tend to be, ball change dominant? Like, that's kind of your a more of a stronger tendency is to switch equipment.
So most of the time, it's more trying to find the right ball, and then I can make the changes if I need to with speed, rotation, roll, surfaces, whatever the variable is. And it's really only like the last option that I have would be a ball change,
Ball change,
unless I notice something that's really drastic. Like if I need something that's going to see it a little sooner, but I can't create that with my hand with that specific ball, then it would be a ball change, or vice versa. If I need to get further down the lane and I can't
right,
do that with speed, then it's the same thing.
right. So in a way, having less overall bowling balls to choose from allows you to go, I know this is the bowling ball, and you can just strictly focus on finding the right touch and speed to kind of get that ball dialed in.
Yeah, and if I really need to, I can always do another one of that same ball, maybe have it duller, shinier, stronger layout, weaker layout. It could be any variable. It just depends on that specific situation.
So it sounds like there's two main differences you see so far. First is that on average, the Motiv bowling balls are a little slower. And for those of you that don't necessarily know the jargon, what that really means is that, as the ball's reacting to the friction, it's just a little bit more controlled or a little bit smoother, as opposed to, faster and more angular. But it sounds like you like that aspect because the storm balls that you liked in the past were all slower. And so it's not necessarily a detriment to you at all. And then the second thing is that Motiv having less overall options because there's less overall brands is a positive. It makes it easier for you to figure out, what's going to the event and what's not. And when you're in the middle of a block, it allows you to focus on making that bowling ball work and use all the tools and tricks that you might have at your disposal. Instead of thinking, that bowling ball that's maybe 5 or 10% different might be, the thing that you need to switch to. So do you currently have a favorite Motiv ball? Is there anything that has really like grown on you quickly?
I've just from in my experience seeing it throughout fields and competing against it. Obviously, the Venom Shock has been a very quick favorite. There's been a handful of other balls as well. The Jackal Ghost has been good for me. The Black Venom, I was very surprised with and how I'm able to use that ball. Later on, once they started to get really burnt, the new Tank Rampage Pearl Urethane we have coming out, that was the main ball I used for my first 4 games yesterday.
Okay.
And that was just to basically keep it in play.
Right.
But I was also doing something that no one else was really doing for as long. I was able to use urethane for half the block, where some guys got out of it real quick and tried to make reactive work. So I think with
What do you
the
think
skill
allowed you
set
to
that I
do
was
that?
using,
What do you think allowed you to
I,
stay in it longer?
I think differences in ball roll and rotation definitely helps. I was trying to be as forward as possible off my hand. So that definitely helped. I used a lot less speed than most other people use. And to begin with, it had a lot of surface, but eventually it shined up like urethane balls tend to do. But from what I noticed amongst the others, they were trying to create more shape this way with urethane, whereas I was trying to get it basically over my left toe like this. If I could
Got
focus
it.
around,
So
it's more like this instead of like that.
you were kind of trapping it and getting it to stop. It sounds like maybe.
Kinda. It felt like if, as long as it was going, if I can figure out the right angle, as long as it was going this way more, I had a little bit of hold on this side of it, and if it got a little right too soon, it was never going to go in the gutter, but it was never going to hold its line either, because
Right.
using kegel machines typically don't put anything on 1-2. So if it got there quick, it hit that side of the cliff, and it was never going to lay off.
Right. I got you. That makes sense. That is a good segue into the urethane. So obviously, I know you threw the pitch black a bit. How do you feel like did the Motiv urethane balls feel just like the pitch blacks and fast pitches and any of the urethane stuff that you threw before?
It took some time to see the right shapes with it. I drilled one up. I drilled two up during the players. My first one was drilled a little bit too strong for later on in the week.
Right.
But the first block, it was perfectly fine. Later on, it was too sensitive, I guess. So we drilled up that other one. That was the other one that I used for my first 4 games. The newer ones are definitely a lot straighter compared to the pre-78 hardness pitch blacks and the other urethanes. So trying to shut those angles down while competing obviously isn't the best idea, but you don't see it until you get some practice with it. And we hadn't had any with that before the players, because it was released to us just before, so we were going in kind of blind, but just not what we're used to seeing. It took a little bit to get used to, because it felt like with the older urethanes you can still shape it a little bit more, but these ones, unless you're throwing it really slow, it's not going to come close. And even if you do, it's going to read the front sooner anyway, so it'll just force you offline.
Got it. And now, has Motiv had to make anything with the new hardness rule, or with do they have a new 78 hardness urethane ball?
So when they brought out the yellow tank last year, they had already, to my understanding, made that with that rule in mind. So they were kind of ahead of the curve on the market, I guess you could say. And it's the same deal with this new burgundy tank that we have that'll be out soon. That's going to be 78 hardness as well, but it's a pearl urethane cover. So It gives you a little bit more length than, I guess, a solid urethane ball would, but it still has that urethane shape in the front.
Okay, cool. So I guess we'll pivot a little bit. I kind of want to talk about your PBA personality, if you have the time. And so again, for those of you that don't know, we only currently sponsor the national tour guys that have lived in Arizona or that we have drilled bowling balls for at the shop. So Sam actually did live here in Arizona for a bit. And when you were here getting to talk to people, there's kind of this perception of you of being very, very stoic and not really excitable or emotional on TV. Do people ever mention or make comments, or what are your general thoughts around that perception of you? I guess do you wish that viewers kind of looked at it a different way, or do you embrace it? Does it maybe motivate you in any particular way? I mean, how do you view it?
I guess in some ways it's a kind of a motivation. Obviously, with social media, you see a lot more of the comments now.
Yeah.
Opposed to what you would before its existence.
Yeah.
So I'd heard it quite a lot in person, but that's nothing new to me. I've heard that a lot ever since I bowled juniors when I was in my teens. Like, I had more of a temper back then and showed it more, but now it's definitely calmed down quite a lot. Whether it's a big game or not, unless it's like a really crucial situation, then there's going to be a little difference. After a while, after reading a lot of the comments and hearing it brought up a ton, it's one of those things where, I'm not saying it was funny at first, but it's just like, these people just have no idea.
Right.
For a lot of us, this is our job.
Yeah.
And I had not a discussion, but someone had called me out on it in the past. And it was in a photo where we had just won a medal for Team Australia at the World Cup. and the comment was, you should smile more and show more enthusiasm or emotion when you bowl. And my response was, well, I'm going to relay this to you. Do you show emotion and smile during your 9 to 5 job?
Right. Yeah.
Like, no one's really happy to be at work sitting at a desk all day. Are you going to be all smiles and joking and flamboyant? No. So
Right.
don't try to relay that onto a situation where you don't know what that is and never will.
Yeah.
So, and I'd had it like beaten into my head, I guess, in a way, that when you put your shoes on to bowl, like, you're there to do a job. You're not there to mess around. You're not there to act out, be loud or anything like that. Now, there's plenty of guys out here that are like that, and
Yeah.
that's them. This is me.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I'll only ever do that if there's, like, if I win or if the situation calls for it. I'm not going to do it because for any other reason.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point, I mean, even in the office or even on the pro shops, I mean, we have 8 locations, and there are guys that when you walk in, they're, easily excitable, easily enthusiastic. And then there are guys that are much more stoic and focused. And I think in many office that, so I tend to agree with you in that people just need to be more empathetic. I think once they see someone on TV, there's like a sense of entitlement that, that like they can, because they're like a consumer, like they're the customer in some way, they feel entitled to be like, well, if you want me to watch, like, dance monkey, and it's just like,
that's basically what it feels like. Especially,
yeah. And it's like, this guy's trying to bowl for his living up here, like,
especially the guys you see on every feed, when if the PBA posts something about a tournament, there's always those guys that are like, will this be on TV? And they don't get that TV production is not cheap. There's a reason why most events aren't on TV, and they're always it's the same people and it's the same complaints every time. But if you had the answers, well, you should come work for us, because you'll be told the exact same things that those guys will be. It can't be done all the time. It's not how it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of using that as a motivator, at this point in your career, what do you feel like is the strongest motivator? Is it like a title? Is it respect from your peers? Is it, like, if you could really give a detailed answer as to like 1 or 2 things that really, in your lowest moments when you're like, I'm not going to give up, I know I can do this. Is it proving it to yourself? I mean, what do you feel like it is?
It feels like it's proving to myself as well as proving to others. There's been a couple of times in recent memory, last few years, where people said, oh, he has a chip on his shoulder or anything like that. And it's like, well, it's not really the case. It's just that it feels like, yes, it may not have been a great year by comparison to a previous year, but that other year should have still meant something going into the next or the years coming. And it's so hard out here that it's a mediocre year or like a mid-20s to 30s year is just not relevant.
Right.
So that is definitely a motivation. Other than that, it's really just for myself, and it's a lot different for the foreign guys who have to fly different parts of the world to get to the US to really be exposed to that kind of, I guess you could say, those markets, as well as the spotlight, I guess.
Yeah,
you could say.
of course. Yeah, the opportunity to be seen. Yeah.
Because elsewhere it's very minimal, and I know from Australia we don't have that many events, and we have even less like recognition through media, like mainstream. There's been a handful of articles or news segments that have been on TV that I can think of.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's laughed at, basically, because it's not.
Yeah.
It's not tennis. It's not golf. It's not swimming. It's not our big sports.
Right.
And then once it does get onto TV, it's just it's seen as a, I guess you could say, a piss take. It's seen as a joke.
Right. So you're in your 20s, right? How old are you?
32.
32. All right. Well, then shows you what I know. That's actually kind of a good age. Based on what you were just saying, would you say that you're optimistic for the future of bowling or professional bowling, generally speaking, either U.S. or international? Are you kind of neutral, or would you say that you're worried?
As far as bowling is here in the US, it's always going to be it's always going to grow.
Okay.
There's definitely more international guys coming out. There was a period where there wasn't quite as many after guys like Belmo, Oscar, and all those other foreign guys started coming. It kind of
Mhm.
started to tear off a little bit, but now there's more and more guys. The problem is we don't see them because they're all in PTQs now. It's not just an
Mm,
open field event where you can bowl the main field.
right.
Um, as for the rest of the world in bowling, probably not something I can talk too much about. I don't know all
Sure.
the details. I just know what we see online, and even then, that's you got to take that with a grain of
Grain
salt.
of salt. Sure. Yeah, that
Um,
makes
but
sense.
what is out there right now is not good.
Right. So I guess still speaking to the tour, there's always a lot of debate around who the current best player is. Is it hard for you to weigh in on that debate as a competitor, do you think, or easier? Like, is it harder because it's like I'm the best bowler right now, because you kind of got to go in with that mentality, or is it easier to weigh in because you have a front row seat to see how good everyone is every week? Um,
I'd say it's easier to weigh in because we do see it every week.
mhm.
Um, at any point, any guy can win that that week if they match up. But the guys who can match up every week and give themselves chances all the time are going to be the ones that win more often. But because we have so few events, it makes it very hard to showcase more people, I guess you could
Right.
say,
Yeah.
because the guys that are up there all the time, they've been through it. They're proven winners, proven multi-titleists, multi-majors, like
Yeah.
guys like EJ, Simo, Belmo, all those guys. They're going to be up there no matter what.
Hmm.
I guess you can relate it to tennis, how they have their big three. Well, those three guys are our big three, and the rest of us are trying to get up there and either be in that contention or to knock them off I guess, their
Right.
perch in a way.
Sure. So if you had to pick one, if you pick right and they win the tournament, whatever, $1 million, whatever it is that would be your dream prize, who are you picking to win the event out of those three, out of Simo, EJ, and Belmo? You don't
I
know
guess
any
it
other
really
details.
depends.
You don't know the pattern. You don't know
Uh,
the center. Yeah, you don't know any other details.
any other details? I would probably have to say Simo.
Simo? Okay, yeah, I would pick the same. I would pick the same. I thought the Player of the Year situation was quite interesting last year. Like the fact that Simo, he top 10 in every event, I think is what it was. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but I mean, EJ won a zillion times, so pretty wild year. But yeah, and I guess the last question I have is, that you would have a unique perspective on is just general culture, either general culture or bowling culture between Australia and the U.S. Do you think you'd ever permanently relocate to the U.S., or like is there family, friends, culture differences that just that make you love Australia, or what are your thoughts?
There's been a lot of times I've thought about moving. My big things would be family. Um, my dad is still back home. He lives 2 minutes away from me, so that's definitely the main reason. Obviously, living there my whole life would be another thing. Um, all the friends that I have there that I'd be, I guess, maybe never seeing again, but
Yeah,
you
yeah,
just don't know. Bowling is definitely way bigger here. There's more events, not just on the PBA level, but depending on which part of the country you're in, you can find something within a short drive every weekend. Back home, we have 4 to 6 big main events, and they're so spread out throughout the year. We might have an event in March, and then one in April, and the next one's not until June. Next one after that's not till late August. It's just so spread out with like I said, geographical locations, and it makes it very hard. And because our country is so big and so spread out, it makes it very hard to travel to other parts financially to make it worth it.
Sure, yeah.
I guess to compare it, like our biggest prize fund for first place would be 5,000 in our dollars, which is about, I think it's about like maybe 3,400 US, which is still quite okay. But our entry fees are what makes it very different. We're paying $300 to $350 for an entry fee.
Wow.
For maybe 5,000 Australian. Whereas here in the US, you can find a local tournament, pay $40 as an entry fee, and then you have brackets and side action on top of that, plus the prize fund. You can easily clear more than that initial prize fund of say 1,000 of a $40 entry, plus brackets and everything else. You can make to maybe 3,000 plus of a $40 entry fee. It's more financially viable and makes more sense. Back home, we don't have side action in our events. It's just bowl a tournament, and whatever you finish as is what you get.
Right. No, that makes sense. So the only real appeal for you to the U.S. isn't anything in terms of like food or places or culture. It's mainly just bowling and the opportunity the better opportunity that you would have. The main thing you're passionate about, which is competing.
Definitely the competing food. It's really not that much different to how it is back home.
Sure.
There is a lot more options, more fast food options, and that's not a good thing because
I can relate to that. Yeah.
I've definitely started to stack the weight on since I've been coming to the US.
Yeah.
But also another big thing is when I do come these days, I have my girlfriend in New York.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
when I fly here, it's usually straight to there. I spend some time there when there's nothing on tour or before a swing of events locally or regionals. It's usually to go there in preparation as well as spend time with her and then go up and do my job, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. I've had you for about 30 minutes now. I really appreciate your time. Great bowling yesterday, man. We hope you keep it up today. Are you thinking your thing to start again today, or what squad are you? What squad are you on today? Are you on the fresh?
So they're currently bowling C squad now. Every squad is fresh, but we bowl on three different patterns.
Got it.
Today is the 43-foot pattern, and it looks like on the graph, it looks like a middle finger. Which, looking at some of the scores now, I'm sure there's quite a few guys that would want to do that, give that to the lane.
To the lane man, yeah.
Because it's not looking very good right now. And it's still got a rerun for us, so I think they're going to be even flatter for when we bowl. So I'm just going to try and have a similar mindset and just go in with not trying to shoot a monster, just try and grind out, not do too much damage. And then if it's a grind and I don't improve on the overall plus number, it still puts me in a decent spot going forward. If I can improve and add to it, well, then that's great.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, good luck. Thanks for joining us. We'll try to tune in with you multiple times throughout the season whenever you have time for us. Viewers, those of you watching, if you have future questions about Motiv, Storm products, or some of the international things we're talking about, leave them down in the comments, and I'll try to ask Sam in our next interview. Sam, thanks again, man. Appreciate it. Good luck, and thanks for being a part of Team Virtue.
No, thank you very much.
Later, man. Bye.
Yeah.